I'm going to go ahead and say this now. This is probably going to be one of those videos where you want to play it in the background and listen while you do something else, because for the most part, it's me giving my opinion about stuff, and there might be a bit of rambling that goes on in here. I've tried to clean it up and cut things as best I can, but, you know, be advised. You probably want to do something instructive while this goes on. This video is going to be a little bit different than the last couple that I've put out, and I'm going to try and do all this in one take. This is like my 8th attempt trying to make it work. But I have a bunch of ammunition in front of me that I have to load up, and I figured maybe just talking about some stuff that's been going on in the shooting world and the YouTube space, and giving my opinion and perspective on it might be of some value to someone. Although I don't know who would really value it, because the audiences of YouTubers are pretty committed to their own beliefs, and most competition shooters already know a lot of the stuff I'm about to say. But regardless, I don't have a whole lot to do other than load these mags, so I might as well just put this out there. So there was a thing recently with Matt Pranka, Brass Facts, Hop, not on a podcast, but on a live stream with Focus Trip. And it got pretty funny pretty fast. Matt basically disrespected Brass and Hop to their face about what it is that they are and what they do. And it was kind of interesting because although he was a little bit belligerent, well, maybe a lot belligerent and intoxicated, and really going at it pretty aggressively, I think he was actually really correct in a lot of the things he said and in the way he said it and why he said it. And none of these people actually knew each other. Brass and Hop don't actually know anything about Pranka. There's a lot of things that they clearly didn't know about him, like who he has and hasn't trained, which if you follow Pranka, you'll know how few civilians he actually does train. And he, of course, definitely didn't know anything about them, because why would he? And the heart of the point he was trying to make, I think, is very correct. And I guess I'm going to try and elaborate on that sort of thing. Because I kind of feel like Brass Facts' video talking about the situation after the fact still kind of misses some, I would say, valuable points about the whole thing. And it's kind of this, right? As civilians, as dudes that never served in the military, went and did cool shit, as dudes that don't go do cool shit for law enforcement, or, you know, are part of teams of guys that are in actually dangerous places doing dangerous things. There isn't a whole lot that we can contribute to truly understanding and using a lot of equipment that is out there. What we can do is compete, though. And the thing about USPSA, IPSC, PCSL, the thing about competition sports when it comes to handguns and rifle shooting is they've always been ahead of everyone else that's out there. Most military and most law enforcement training is very outdated, and a lot of it is just due to political stuff and people not wanting to change things and people not wanting to be held to certain standards, or them not even having the budget to do so because of perhaps corruption or something else. So there's always been like competition shooters, some of which are retired military, some of which are retired law enforcement, and for some fucking reason, no one likes to talk about that when they talk about how competition shooters don't know shit or it'll get you killed in the streets. No one talks about all the retired military and law enforcement guys that are also absolute fucking hitters when it comes to competition stuff. And the thing is, competition shooting, if you are actually trying to win and you truly understand all the different rules and all the penalties and how everything it is recorded, it is an incredibly fair and incredibly useful tool to maximize your performance and your skill and to motivate you to get better. And it's a really big thing that people don't seem to understand about like USPSA and IPSC is most men need some sort of motivating factor for them to get up and truly do something. And to do something at the highest level, there needs to be a lot of motivation. Now, simply being able to own a handgun or own a rifle and want to protect your family, the bar of skill to do that incredibly vague thing is pretty low, right? But if you want to shoot GM, right, or you want to win your local matches, or you want to win major matches, or you want to be a national champion, the bar goes through the roof. And it takes so much time and effort and analyzing and blood and sweat to actually get to those levels. It takes so much time committed, and you have to so deeply understand shooting whatever platform of weapon you choose and how your body works with shooting it. And the thing is, a lot of competition shooters have basically made our understanding of handgun shooting and rifle shooting, like, they've completely flipped how we understood and how we looked at it. The thing is, about like any reviews about any products regarding rifle equipment and like night vision equipment here in the States, I don't think any of it's of value to anyone. Like, anyone that has any review about any sort of SBR or mid-length or long-range setup, this optic, this laser device, these magazines, this muzzle device, this recoil system, this bolt system, I don't think any of it's of any actual value. Because here in the States, the only reason we understand shooting handguns and red dots so well is because of competition shooting. It is because of those dudes and them going out and being contracted to train military groups and civilians and people. It is only because the winners of national matches and champions have decided to share what they did to reach those levels that we understand and we can get as good as we can with like handguns and red dots today. The only reason we understand how to shoot these things so fucking well is because of those like 1% of dudes that have taken it that far. And it's only when those guys like that are that 1% go and do this sort of thing that it changes our perspective on it. I don't think anyone thought a Glock could truly be used as a competition gun until Brantley came in 4th American and 7th overall, or 7th in carry optics at Carry Optics Nationals. I don't think anyone would have considered a Glock 17 a gun that you could take to that high of a level until a 24-year-old kid from Alabama went in there and made everyone look bad. Kyle Litzy winning overall for the IPSC Rifle World Shoot with his rifle setup and the components that he built for his gun. I think him and the other guys that were on his team, like Joe Farwell, are like the only people that can actually teach or give advice about shooting rifle and who truly understand shooting rifle. Here in America, we don't have a lot of rifle competition. IPSC is something that's really big, and the rifle IPSC competitions are really big overseas, but here there isn't a lot of that. And it's really interesting when you listen to Kyle talk about when he started traveling and started seeing these parts that were being manufactured by competitors from other countries, because their parts were better, because they had spent more time trying to understand and make those guns work for them and work to the highest performance possible. And it's only because they were motivated by competition that they did those things. Because like, that's the private sector. That's people wanting to get better and wanting to improve things. A lot of the stuff that the military does comes down to what they think they might need, or a couple of things that they notice are going on in certain theaters of war. And there's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of, how much is this going to cost for us to fucking make all this shit? How much do we actually care about our troops? What's the level of training that those guys even have to need these things? I think it was like the Future Weapons program that, I think it was around Vietnam. I could be completely wrong about that, where we were developing new types of weapons that basically a bunch of dudes in our military said they wanted this, and they contracted a bunch of people to start manufacturing things. And we ended up scrapping most of the future weapons, most of these really bizarre, interesting weapons, and we just threw magnification on the AR-15, and that became, I believe, the ACOG, right? That's how that ended up being a thing. Like, the way they improved a weapon system was they just gave it magnification instead of doing bizarre things with the action or with the ammunition. So, like, when we start to see improvement and development of a lot of stuff, it isn't because of, like, military or because of law enforcement. It's because of civilian side dudes and dudes that are competing that are really breaking this thing down. So it's because of dudes that are going out and doing, like, all the performance and all the legwork that develop this stuff and that we truly understand it. Their understanding, their reviews of the products, their perspective on things is of actual value because they've put in a tremendous amount of legwork to truly understand how it works, right? It was like what Pranka was talking about with, you know, the guys that were around him and his circle. If they wanted to be better at driving, they sought out the best drivers in the world. It's like actual dudes that are competing, right? If they wanted to know how to climb mountains the best, they sought out the best mountaineers in the world. They didn't go to, like, other entities within our own government. They sought out professionals and people that have spent all their time working in just that one thing. And when it comes to, like, gear and equipment, whether that's night vision stuff, whether that's nylon gear, just optical systems and stuff that's out there, like, there isn't dudes stateside running around doing stuff in plate carriers. I guess tactical games might be the one instance of guys walking around, messing around with kit and still having to do a little bit of shooting, but they're doing a lot of physically active stuff. You know, because if you looked at the military for, like, nylon gear and stuff, they have a lot of stuff that's issued to them. Some dudes get to actually select and choose what it is that they want to run. But, like, we don't just look at the dudes that are, like, going active on deployments and getting sent out there to fight. And sometimes when they get deployed, they don't fight anyone. They don't deal with any sort of combat. They're just pulling security in certain places. And a lot of the time, those guys are just out there doing a job. Like, they're not really, like, looking at everything that's going on and trying to break it down. And if they come back with a certain opinion or certain view of a product or a certain thing that they used, that could entirely just be independent of them. It's like when somebody says that you shouldn't base your kit off someone else because their kit is based off their mission or something that they are doing. And we really don't know what we're going to be doing here, stateside civilians in America. There isn't exactly any real reason to think that there's going to be a civil war or an all-out war or, like, another presidential coup or some crazy shit like that. There's no real reason to think that any of us are going to be in plate carriers fighting it out with other guys stateside. So, like, what review of a plate carrier does there really need to be? Because no one knows how we're going to be using any of this shit if we had to. So why would you listen to anyone's opinion of it? There's no real value in it. So there's, like Pranka even says, it's just kind of like consumerism. And it honestly is. Like, here's all this stuff about night vision equipment. Most dudes aren't spending enough time under nod and using these devices for it to be of any real value. There's also, like, really high-end night vision equipment that is not neutered. So it's, like, high power. It can actually, like, has proper output and stuff. And if you talk to a lot of guys that run laser devices and do stuff under nod, they will tell you that you don't really need the maximum output devices. So instead of buying, like, a PEC 15 that fucking E4'd its way to you, fell off the back of a truck, you can get something like a D-Ball A3, right? Or you end up, you know, somebody else will tell you, you got to get the D-Ball that's got a LED-based illumination device built into it, and that thing glows red, and you can see it from the muzzle device at distance. So in a hypothetical situation, maybe you're shot because somebody can see an LED red glowing thing on you, because maybe your opposition has night vision. Or maybe your opposition has thermal devices and all your night vision and all your night vision kit and all your training means absolutely fucking nothing. Or maybe they have drones, because if we're being real, that's a pretty dirty way to fight people guerrilla style right now. So like, there isn't a lot of reviews about gear and equipment that is in practice of value to anyone, and the people who are giving their opinions about why this stuff is useful or why you may want it, or the good and the bad, their very metrics for what is good and what is bad, I think, are deeply flawed. And I think this is something that is understood by people who shoot competitively and who actually take training extremely seriously, is you find that for the most part, what you use does not actually fucking matter. If anything, the only thing that really matters is it reliable and is it light? That's for the most part it. There isn't really anything. I don't think there's anything that anyone understands about rifle shooting in this country right now, because we don't have rifle competition. If we had rifle competition, you would see a massive change in parts and tooling and use of things and in technique, and you would see massive improvements across the board. And I don't think 3-gun cuts it. Personally, I don't like PCSL 2-gun either, because it breaks down the two different types of weapons that you could be using instead of focusing on the one. If something like PCSL 1-gun got way more popular, I think then you would be able to trust and listen to what people have to say and how they understand how to use things. And like, I'll give you a really interesting example about how, what dudes say and how they understand kit doesn't really make sense. LPVOs, right? If you go and you try and look up anything about LPVO, you will find a massive rabbit hole of information and comparisons, and sometimes you have videos where you have a camera rigged up behind multiple different scopes showing you different lighting conditions, different times of day, parallax, differences of scope shadow. You can find all kinds of different metrics on how dudes look at LPVOs. You have drop tests, all kinds of stuff. And the thing is, as somebody who was looking to buy one, I went through that rabbit hole. I looked at all these things. I looked up all the data. I looked at the weights of everything. I listened to a lot of different people on YouTube's opinions about it. And what's interesting when people talk about what is good and what is bad, what is considered the best LPVO on the market is the Night Force one, right? That one that is basically indestructible. It's also like the most expensive one that's out there. The ATACR, I think. Like, the ATACR is like the top tier of LPVOs on the market. It's also the most expensive one. And people talk about its 1X and, its reticle and the first focal plane and how useful that is over second focal plane, right? And the thing is, if you ignore all of that shit and you go and you look at, like, again, IPSC and PCSL, the most frequently used performance LPVO for speed and accuracy that has won multiple competitions under extreme stress out to pretty significant distances, to the point where wind becomes a problem. The most used LPVO has been the Vortex Razor 1-6 second focal plane. This LPVO is not talked about basically at all from any of these people that talk about rifle shooting and LPVOs on the market. And the reason for it is because none of these dudes on YouTube that are reviewing this thing have put a significant amount of rounds through a rifle with this optic and had to do it in a setting that they themselves did not set up, right? Dudes who go to matches, they can't simulate things. They're being tested. Everything's being recorded. They're being watched, right? If they actually want to win, there's a lot of stress on them, and there's a lot of thinking and discipline that has to come into effect. And there's a lot of things that don't really fucking matter in the way that stuff actually gets used. Like, if you listen to Kyle Litzy, Kyle uses a BDC reticle, which is considered the least accurate or least precise of the possible reticles that are out there, between like MOA and a mill style reticle. And people have tried to argue with Kyle and the fact that he uses a BDC and call him stupid. Like precision rifle guys call him stupid. And the thing is, the fucking dude is beating everyone. He is winning. He is the best goddamn rifle shooter in the world right now. So why would you listen to these other fucking people that don't actually compete and don't do these things? Because 0 to like 430, it works perfectly fucking fine. And if you understand the BDC, if you have your own data that you collect on it, which it's your equipment, it's your ammunition, it's your rifle, you should know how everything works. It's the fastest one on the market, and it's more than durable enough for matches, for shooting. And people will try and talk about the durability of certain things here and there because I guess they have this fantasy in their head that they're going to be catching fucking spall and shrapnel and bombs and all kinds of shit. And they're going to be fine. And that first thing that's going to go is their fucking optic and not their limbs. And it's all fantasy. It's not based in anything. It's just hypotheticals that people run in their head. And unfortunately, that's really what this all comes down to, is you have hypotheticals and you have fantasy. And the realest thing that we can do as civilians, and it's also great for military and law enforcement, it's extremely good for them, is competition shooting. It's the one thing that we can use as a pretty fair metric for performance, for skill, and for actually running equipment and seeing if it is reliable and if it can do the job. And the thing is, YouTubers and all these other people are just fucking allergic to competition. And it's really cool that like it's gotten way more well-known and way more popular and there's way more of it talked about. You know, Pranka puts out a lot of stuff, Stager puts out a lot of stuff, PSTG and Joel Park, Kim, all those guys, Hunter Constantine, Brantley, Lucas, like all of these dudes put out so much information right now that there is basically no point to ever attending a shooting class by anyone ever again. Because you don't need it. There is more than enough free information that if you apply yourself and you actually want it, you will have better skill and better performance than basically everyone else. And I think Brantley kind of proved that point better than anyone. And the reviews of people who have never put in that sort of discipline are, for the most part, worthless. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know why their metrics are flawed because they've not pursued this thing or done this thing. And it's just wild to me that they don't. Maybe it's a locality thing where they don't have a lot of competitions around them. But honestly, I find that as an excuse because I don't have a lot of money. I'm basically fucking nobody. I am very realistically considering being the dude that directs the PCSL matches here where I live. Because there's not a lot of rifle competition. There's not a lot of motivation for dudes to want to shoot rifle. And if I build it for them, they will come and they will get better. And it will attract more people and it will become more popular. This is something Tony Mazza is doing in Florida. Like, we have to be the ones to create the matches to bring the people in. It will make everyone better and it keeps everything a lot more interesting. And personally, I'm taking the shooting and the competition stuff so seriously right now that I'm not touching rifle at all. I'm not spending the money on rifle ammo. It's all going to 9mm. And in the last 4 months, I've probably fired 7,000 rounds through a Glock 17. And I've probably done 3 times as much dry fire for every round fired, if not significantly more than that. And I'm taking it as far as I can go. I'm putting aside money that I could spend on rifle gear, because it still interests me. And I am looking at travel costs. I'm looking at hotels. I'm looking at flights. I'm looking at the costs of these major matches. I'm going to have to take time off of work. So now it's not even just in my own local area, people can see me do bad and see my performance, and that motivates me and stresses me out to become a better shooter. Now it's actual major matches and national matches. And I'm doing it solely to get better. The opinions of people that go and do those sorts of things, that take it as far as possible, are infinitely more valuable than anything some fucking YouTuber says. Because for the most part, YouTubers, from what I can tell, it's just a hobby. They are enthusiasts, as Pranka has said. They're just people that are having fun and enjoy what they do. The thing is, though, they will fucking argue with you about stuff. Like they know what they're talking about, or that their reasoning or that their logic makes sense. Right? A lot of people would say that the SRO is a very fragile optic, and because of how fragile it is, it's kind of a piece of shit. Well, I've, at this point, dropped my SRO 4 times, and one of those times I ate shit straight on the concrete and it didn't break. There are some dudes that have SROs that look like they were, ACOGs that got caught in a bomb blast, and they don't have any of the black ionizing left on it. It's just straight aluminum shining, and those optics still work, right? And then you look at something like the Acro that is supposed to be more durable and is better, and those fucking things break out the gate. Like, for the most part, the opinions about all this stuff is irrelevant. And if you look into why this is, on Instagram, you can find a lot of these high-level competition shooters, and you can stalk them, basically, to learn how they do things and try and mimic them. And they hand out a lot of free information, which is very generous, I would say. On YouTube, those same competition shooters, they might have a max of like 5,000 subscribers. A lot of dudes that are around me that are GMs, including Brantley, if you look them up on YouTube, they have like a maybe 4,000 to 5,000 subscribers, maybe even less than that. People go to YouTube and they go to gun shit on YouTube for entertainment. And it's weird because with the amount of money and time that all these people end up putting into this stuff, they act as if it's not for entertainment. They act like they're taking it way more seriously than they really are. And it's just not the case. And partially the reason why this stuff is like less known, even though it again has gotten better over time, is Instagram is incredibly like, it throttles anyone that posts anything about gun stuff. Like there's a lot of incredibly good handgun shooters and rifle shooters that no one will ever know who they are. All you have to do is look up matches and look up the leaderboard and look at who's at the top. I guarantee you, most matches you won't know the top 10 guys. You will have never fucking heard of them because they're just dudes. They're just blue-collar guys or guys that maybe work for a department somewhere, the one guy in that entire department, and they decided to go and start doing matches, and they got super good. And no one will ever know who they are because they don't want to be big fucking YouTubers. They don't see the value in it. They have their own money from doing whatever job they have outside of the internet, and they go and they competition shoot because they want to fucking win and because they want to be the best one. The opinions of those dudes are worth their weight in gold because it's honest. There's nothing as far, I mean, sometimes there are sponsors that back competition shooters, which again, even though I am speaking very highly of competition shooters, you have to understand that there are people that pretend to be competition shooters. There are people that pretend and take money and try and be honest in the competition world. Just like YouTube, I would probably say to a lesser extent, because it's like more obvious when they're doing it. But with the way that everything is recorded and everything is structured, it's pretty easy to pick up on those sorts of things. You can't lie when you have a year-long record of whether or not you've been performing well or whether or not you've been bombing on things. And those guys are the ones that actually understand kit. They are the guys that actually understand gear. They're the ones that actually know how to use these things. And everything else on YouTube, all this other shit, a lot of stuff dirty civilian pushes out there with like the e-bikes and different sorts of prepping stuff and survival stuff, uniform things. All of this shit is fucking fantasy. You don't need any of it. You don't need a single bit of it whatsoever. It's just cool shit and gadgets. People don't know how to run their tools. They don't know how to shoot. They don't know how to train. They don't understand what it takes. And what's worse is they do not have the fucking motivation to go and do it even after being called out for it. They will spend tens of thousands of dollars on gear and equipment and base a personality about gun shit and be so well known and popular and none of them will fucking go do competition, because for some people it isn't fun, it's just hard. So that's the thing with it, right? Like, no matter what, those dudes won't go and they won't do competition no matter how much time passes. It doesn't interest them. Doing the hard thing that might actually teach them how to do stuff doesn't interest them. And what's weird is, like, if these guys go and they do a bit of training here and there, it's with some fucking schmuck that doesn't know jack shit. Some dude who used to do cool guy shit in the military, or is well known, or is popular. Like, they go and they'll train with them, and they'll learn tactics and tactical shit. And it's, again, just stuff that's based in fucking fantasy. And, like, that's just the thing. Like, a lot of the time when you see these YouTubers finally go train with someone or take a class with someone, it's just some fucking schmuck that doesn't actually know how to shoot. It's not a performance-based guy. It's not a guy that's ever won anything. It's just some dude that used to do cool shit and kind of promotes that out there. And I guess some wide-eyed civilian that doesn't understand how any of this shit works and doesn't actually shoot a whole lot doesn't really understand the stuff. Because, you know, reviewing a product between like 5,000 and 7,000 rounds is one thing, but then you have competition shooters that are shooting Connex containers worth of ammunition. And it's like, when Brass Facts had to ask Pranka at what point would the opinions of people like him and Hop be of value to like these communities and these people, I think if you have to ask that question, you don't grasp how little you actually know. Because there's not a lot that I can talk about right now with like my guns and my equipment and my shooting. Like, I guarantee you I'm better than most of these dudes. Like, just looking at what they do and what they understand, they're not even in the game, as it were. But I don't know enough to where I can give advice. I'm not at the level that someone like Brantley Merriam is. I can't really put out a video talking about my setup and whether or not this matters or what is relevant and what is not relevant. I know what I don't know at this point, and I can't talk on any of this shit. That's why I don't really see any reason for me to give reviews of products going on in the future for a while, more than likely, because I'm not sure that I know enough and that's really a value. And what I really think is that it just doesn't fucking matter. Like, none of this shit fucking matters. You don't need to spend money on gear, all this gear and all this equipment, and you can just train and practice and let the training and the practice dictate whether or not you experiment and try new things. Like, let that be the reason you grow and develop. Like, let there actually be a stimulus behind it instead of fucking fantasy and ideas that other people come up in their own head. That way they can make a YouTube video to get fucking subscribers or get fucking AdSense or promote, sponsors. When Hop went on his tangent, the Pranka, about how people that don't have gear need to have some sort of frame of reference for what gear to get to then get that gear. And like, that is what matters, is like, they need something. And that's why like his content and the content that people like him put out there is good, is because when people don't know anything, they have nothing to go off of, having something for what is good or what is bad is useful for them to go and get. And I think that's actually wrong. I think they don't actually need the gear. They don't need the gear at all. They don't need packs. They don't need go bags. They don't need all this prepper shit. They don't need plate carriers. They don't need these fucking battle belts. They don't need these rifles set up in these fucking ways. They don't actually need this fucking gear. What they need is to go and do something that would actually stimulate the need for that gear. And then they make that decision based on experience. Otherwise, it's just dudes with like a tactical checklist of things they want to have for fantasy. Because in the last 7 years, I have cultivated a lot of very good, very durable equipment. I've basically never cheaped out on anything in my entire career of shooting. And I've got maybe like $10,000 worth of shit I don't use lying around that I need to sell. It got used heavily, and it's never going to be touched again, because competition changed everything. It showed me what actually mattered and what I actually needed, and the rest of it is dead weight. That's I think largely what Pranka's issue, and I'm just speaking for someone else, you might disagree with that. And maybe people don't like the fact that I'm the one saying this instead of him, but like, people don't just fucking need the gear because it's what like infantry units have. So they have their own checklist based off that. Or it's what SWAT or what law enforcement units, departments have. So they need these things too. Like, we don't need any of it. We're not going to be in like an open fucking conflict, more than likely. We're not going to be battling it out. There aren't going to be fucking tanks rolling into the cities. We're not going to have dudes and fucking ghillie suits and in camo running up in the fucking hills with 18-inch rifles and Mark 12s, you know, fighting it out with like fucking activated National Guard that have turned against the American population. Like, we don't need none of this fucking shit. Because the chances of us fighting like that are incredibly fucking slim. Damn near impossible. Like, running away from cities and learning to be dangerous in the mountains, there's really no indication that that's how that's going to go at all. And if you do, you might just get caught by a thermal drone and get blown the fuck up. Like, who knows how dangerous or how wild things could get if there was conflict of that level. So you end up with just a bunch of fucking equipment that lies around, and maybe on like a weekend or something, you go for a fucking ruck and on a mountain hike somewhere, or, you know, maybe you do your rifle shooting at like 50 yards. Like, you don't need to do any of that shit. If you want to learn how to use the stuff and be good to use the stuff, spend your money on ammunition, a basic rifle build that is just reliable, which would be the most important fact, is that it just fucking runs well, and just go do matches and learn shit from there. That's really all you need to do. And that'll teach you and show you everything that you need, and you will get way better than everyone else. And as you learn things and as you make decisions, you have more money in the long term to do other stuff. Like go to major matches, go to bigger matches. I guess that covers just about everything I wanted to talk about. Later.